Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video, this time around for Yakuza 5 for the PlayStation 3. A game that some of you may know, I chose this to be my game of the year for 2015. It was a very late release into the year. I think the game got released in December, and it wasn't until many months after that I was able to beat the game. But what a surprise! And it was funny because I did my top games of 2015. And a PlayStation 3 out of all the systems that I owned ended up taking the top spot, and there's a good reason why. I mean, Yakuza 5 is perhaps the best Yakuza game to date. Personally, I have not played the first two, but I did play 3, 4, and 5, which is another thing why it took me so long to record this video. I was kind of hoping to get my hands on both the first two Yakuza games and maybe do a serious discussion. Comparing all 5 games and choosing my favorite, but I don't think I'm gonna get around to do that, so I'll just do a Yakuza 5 impressions video. Better late than never, I guess. But yeah, Yakuza 5, it's a game that I strongly recommend you guys playing it after you played either 3 or 4, or even better, both. Personally, my story with Yakuza is 3 was my first one, and then after I beat 3, I played 4. After I beat 4, I played 5, obviously. But I would not recommend playing 5 straight away, even though it's the best game. The reason being, it does not have a reminiscent option in the menu like 4 and 3 do. The cool thing about Yakuza 3 and 4 is they have an option that you can watch the cinematic movies of the previous games. That way you get up to date with what happened in the story. And the story in the Yakuza games are very peculiar. They're very interesting, but at the same time they're cheesy, and they don't take themselves seriously, but at the same time they have a serious note to them. So it's very hard to explain. It's a very Sega-esque type of story, if you will, where they're interesting. And I think they play a key role, obviously, in the series of the game. So again, I would not recommend for anybody to play Yakuza 5 right off the gate, because you will be missing on a lot of the importance of the characters and the charm and the environments that you get to explore within these games. Those are all key, and I know Yakuza 5, I think last month was part of PlayStation Plus. It was a free game, so I think Yakuza 4 was already a free game, so if you guys have that on your download library and you haven't played any Yakuza games, definitely play 4 before you play 5. But if it was up to me, I would recommend you guys playing 3 before you play 4, just because to get soaked into what the Yakuza world is. I think 3, for me at least, did a pretty good job of introducing what the characters are, and giving a pretty good overview of what Yakuza 1 and 2 were through the videos, sequences. And of course, the story of 3, which focuses solely on Kiryu, which is the main, kind of like the main protagonist of the entire series. You get to know him in full detail because in that game you only play as him, whereas Yakuza 4 introduced the ability to play as different characters, which was pretty cool because it just added that variety that was, in my opinion, needed to keep the gameplay fresh. Each character in Yakuza 4 has its own fighting style and their own story segment, and at the end everything comes together for the story, as far as the story purposes. And Yakuza 5 follows that same trend as Yakuza 4, thankfully, because the game allows you to play as 4 different characters. And the cool thing about playing with all of them is that actually 5 characters, because you play as Kiryu, Shin Akiyama, the baseball player, Haruka, and Saejima. So that's 5 players. So yeah, it allows you to play as 5 different characters. Each has their own story portion, and it's just really fun. And like I said, it has a variety of fighting styles that you see across the characters. And the cool thing about Yakuza 5 is you finally get to play as Haruka, which is this young girl that has been raised by Kiryu. She obviously doesn't fight; she's a teenager, and her story part in Yakuza 5 is she's trying to become an idol, which is like a Japanese pop figure or teenage idol, whatever. And her part of the story, you play like rhythm mini games which is a pretty nice break between all the fighting and the action offered by the normal Yakuza characters like Kiryu and Saejima and Akiyama and things like that. So yeah, the one thing that Yakuza 5 really I guess sets it apart from other games is that this game is bigger in every single way, for good or worse. The amount of places you can visit is vast. You can visit, I believe, 5 different Japanese cities. You have Kamurocho, which is the the key setting in these Yakuza games, but I believe there are 3 new cities that you can visit. I don't know the names off the top of my head. They're really hard to remember because everything is in Japanese, obviously, including the audio, obviously. And even though the text, obviously, it's translated in English, it's pretty hard to keep track of not only the names of the cities, but also the name of the characters. Because another thing that the Yakuza games do, they do a pretty good job of confusing you. As far as introducing new characters left and right from different clans. You have the Tojo clan, you have the different clans of Yakuza families that come in together at points in the story, and it's very hard to keep track of the names because they're not Western names that we're used to hearing or reading. So it's very hard to keep track of the story, and that's another thing. Perhaps a little bit of a negative thing with the Yakuza games. Their stories are very, very convoluted, and they will require you to be paying attention the whole time. Keeping track of names, characters, what each character has done in the past, the alliances that these characters have with different groups, and it's a mess. It becomes really messy when old characters from like Yakuza 3 come into the picture, and then you're like, oh yeah, I remember that name, or I remember that character, or characters that come in from different parts of the game, different chapters, and like I said, the story can get very convoluted, very messy, but overall it's just fun. It's fun trying to put all the pieces together, and it just becomes, like I said, a little bit of a cheesy story because there's plenty of, and this is without spoiling anything, this is a characteristic of the Yakuza games. It becomes typical to have traders within the story, and then there are plot twists here and there, and this guy it's a traitor, but then there's another traitor to the traitor, and it just becomes an entire mess. And as far as the story in Yakuza 5, this is perhaps the one game that really pushes cinematic movies and things like that into you, because I do not recall Yakuza 3 and 4 to have as many movies in the game or voice dialogue into the game as Yakuza 5 did. And this is a game that will take you at the very least 50 hours to complete. And I would say out of those 50 hours, I'm there to say half of those 50 hours are just cinematic sequences. So if you guys are part of that group that hated Metal Gear Solid 4 for being basically a movie, you're not gonna like Yakuza 5. It's basically a movie. That's what the game is. For a lot of parts, you play a little bit, then you watch a cinematic movie. You play a little bit, you watch a cinematic movie, and which is why another reason you really have to be invested in these characters and into the overall universe of the Yakuza games. If you're not interested, then you're not going to enjoy this game. If you have played, for example, Yakuza 3 and you thought it was an okay game, I wouldn't probably invest my time, playing 4 and then playing 5, because it really builds up that universe. But for people that do enjoy that, that's why I ended up picking Yakuza 5 as my game of the year in 2015. I think that game is basically the sum or the culmination of just adding all the charm, all the characters, all these places you visited in the past, all these people you fought, all the friends you made along the way, all the things you solved, all the traders, all the Yakuza different families and things like that. Everything comes together in Yakuza 5. You visit places that are familiar, you visit new places, you interact with people that you have played with or have interacted with in previous games. So it just really feels like a pretty good TV show where it keeps referencing back to the past, and it just keeps building up. And that's another cool thing about the Yakuza series is how Kiryu, for example, the main protagonist, he ages as the games go on. So you can actually see a change in his not only appearance but also in his personality. And this is more obvious in characters like Haruka, which she in Yakuza 3 she was a child basically, and now she's a teenager. She's doing the whole idol thing, and you can see her personality obviously has changed, her physical appearance obviously, and things like that. So it's very interesting how the series it's evolving, and now that Yakuza 6 has been announced and it's supposed to be released next year here in the West, I'm super excited because it'll be a progression to see those characters, what they're up to now, and what mess will Kiryu get himself into again, thanks to his former Yakuza past. But as far as the graphics, Yakuza 5 looks very, very similar to 3 and 4. Perhaps a little bit more polished, but I really enjoyed the level of detail that these games have. When you walk into a restaurant and you look at the menu, you have pictures of the actual food items that you're going to eat. Just an overall very colorful game. When you're in Kamurocho, you see all the neon lights of the city and things like that. So graphically, I always enjoy the Yakuza games, especially during the cinematic sequences. The facial animations, the facial expressions, I think they're all pretty well animated, and they all look pretty good. So I'm excited to see what Yakuza 6 will offer, because that's like the first Yakuza game that will be developed from the ground up for the PS4. So I'm interested to see how Sega will use that extra power in order to improve the graphics. So I'm very, very excited for that. But the graphics for Yakuza 5 are great as it is, in my opinion. The cool thing about the game is the audio. It does have the Japanese original audio, and personally, I'm somebody that prefers to have translated, voice acting. Like in Xenoblade Chronicles, I really enjoyed the fact that game had English voice acting. But for the Yakuza games, I'm so used to the voices of all these characters that I just really like. I don't know what they're saying, obviously, but you have the subtitles there, and it just adds to the experience, in my opinion. Listening to the same characters for so many iterations of the games, I think they grow on you, even though you don't necessarily know what they're saying. But it adds to the charm of the game, most definitely. Now, Yakuza 5, in terms of gameplay, it's very similar to the previous games, where it's a fighting. It's almost like an action RPG almost, where the fights they're basically random encounters. As you walk through the city, you find either thugs or other Yakuza members that are just trying to fight you. And these fights are very useful because they're very easy, and you get experience points. And you can use the experience points to level up your character. And once your character levels up, you gain more health, you gain more heat, and you gain more. You learn new moves, which is obviously a pretty important part of the game. And so it has that light RPG element in which you level up your characters and you choose, what skills to learn based on the experience points that you get. And obviously, like I mentioned before, each character has its own fighting style. And Saejima, for example, he's like a brute force character where he has powerful moves. Personally, I like I think Shun Akiyama, which he has like very combo-esque types of moves. And it's really fun using him. So I really like not only his fighting style but also his goofiness as far as being a character. I think he's a pretty fun character to play as, to learn more about him. So the fighting and the combat and the controls are very similar to previous games, but there are some refinements that were made for Yakuza 5. Another thing where the Yakuza games, not 5 specifically, but all of them excel, is the extra content that the games give you. Mini games galore. You can go to the arcades, to the Sega arcades, play classic arcade Sega games, which is pretty awesome. You can do the karaoke mini games, which they look basically like rhythm mini games. You can do the dating games with the Japanese girls. You can go to restaurants and eat their menus, and they have like a side story with this like popular chef that is trying to get to eat in different places. So you go out to dinner with him, and it's kind of funny. So the game has a ton of side stories and a ton of mini games that you can do just to divert a little bit from the regular mainline story of the game, which like I said, it can get tiring, especially when they throw you so many names at you. So sometimes you need a break from all the main story action and play the mini games and whatnot, which is why it took me longer than normal to beat the game, because I always get invested into the side stories and the overall goofiness of the game. And Yakuza 5 takes the cake as far as overall goofiness. There are some missions where there was this one very funny one where you dress as a Santa Claus and you beat people up because there was a group. The game takes place during December, which is the holiday month in Japan, and this one side story. There's a group of like brats that are beating this one guy that dresses as a Santa Claus for like to do like he works for like a shop, and he's basically like a mascot wearing the Santa Claus outfit, and he's getting beat up by these people. So at one point in the game, you put the suit on, and then you wait for these people to come in, and then you just beat the hell out of them with the Santa Claus outfit, which is, I thought it was funny as hell. There's another side story where this bear that you encounter early in the game in chapter 2, he has some kind of part of the story, part of the side story of Saejima, but later in the game you find this bear again, but he comes to the city. So you're like fighting this huge, you're wrestling this huge bear in the middle of the city with all the people walking and looking, and it's just funny, just being able to punch this like huge bear, and it's just silly and fun. And it just goes to show how the game, it does have, a serious story as far as, dealing with the Yakuza, with the crime and all these traders and figuring out who is behind what. But it also has a silly side to it, like the Santa Claus side story and things like that definitely give this game a very unique charm. So overall, Yakuza 5, again, me choosing this as my game of the year for 2015 was a very personal decision, because I would have never picked Yakuza 5 if that was the only game in the series that I played. My decision of picking this as my #1 game was it builds up on 3, it builds up on 4, and then 5 delivers this very nice product that really is the culmination of all the experiences you had in the past with different characters. And I cannot wait for 6, because I believe 6 will build up on what 5 offered, and it'll be really fun. And of course you have Yakuza 0 coming out pretty soon, which will be even more fun to explore the past of Kiryu. I think that game takes place in the 80s, so it'll be really cool to get to explore that aspect of the early story of the Yakuza universe. But overall, guys, Yakuza 5 was easily my game of the year of 2015. Again, just because I really loved the previous entries in the series, I really got soaked into this Yakuza universe of visiting the different cities, visiting the different locales, learning the fighting styles of different characters, and just getting to know each character throughout the game. I think it's so much fun. So I cannot wait to play 0 and 6 sometime in the near future. So that's it for now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.